Good afternoon to all of you, and thank you to the International Association of Tamil Journalists for extending the invitation to attend this very important conference. I wish to tender my apologies for my inability to attend this conference and meet you all in person, as I was unable to process my visa application. As the conference title suggests, there is a close nexus between the War on Terror Declaration and the functions of the media. Media coverage of human rights issues in conflict situations within the context of war and terror is an important subject for discussion and research. It is evident that in the post-September 11 era, the world is facing a new type of war, almost entirely different from previous wars in modern history. As scholars would say, the basic conflict structure is not a confrontation between nation-states, but rather one between an international coalition of states and a loosely constructed and less nation-state-based antagonist. The US President Bush expressed soon after the September 11 attack that, "I will seize the opportunity to achieve big goals. There is nothing bigger than achieving peace," and declared war on terror. Most of the governments gave their unconditional support to Bush. Bush said, "Who is not with me is against me," and the cluster bombs in Afghanistan left no doubt that he meant what he said. Many governments saw the war on terror a great opportunity and crushed separatist movements in their countries, using the war on terror discourse and in the name of global war on terror. President Bush saw terrorism as evil, which can be treated by killing terrorists everywhere in the world. It was not a surprise that the Sri Lankan government, which was fighting against the LTTE, found the war on terror declaration as a golden opportunity to win the war. The US Embassy in Sri Lanka also issued a statement in October 2001 that Sri Lanka, the little island, would not be left out in US's fight against terrorism. Recent attacks in New York and the Pentagon in Washington had provoked worldwide revolution against terrorism and strengthened the resolve of the international community towards fighting the global plague. Our commitment to assist to Sri Lanka in its fight against terrorism is undiminished and will continue. We also reiterate our support for the position of the Sri Lankan government against the establishment of an independent Tamil. This US statement came little after Sri Lankan President Kumargurunathan called for an extra support to fight terrorism and criticised the West for its double standards in tackling the problem. Bush said that he was going to war in order to bring peace. He outlined why it was necessary for the US government to launch a war against the state and people of Iraq. "We seek peace. We strive for peace, and sometimes peace must be defended." This is how Bush remarked. It was in the premise of the war on terror that the President Kumargurunathan's so-called war for peace strategy and current President Mahinda Rajapaksa's so-called humanitarian war were pursued. The consequences of these so-called wars within the context of global war on terror severely impacted democratic process of the country in all dimensions. The media was and continues to be one of the most affected sectors as a result of these wars. It affected all aspects of the dynamics of news production of human rights reporting. There are a number of factors that hamper human rights reporting in Sri Lanka. Among these factors, media suppression is the main constraint. Lack of access to information, ethnic division, interest in the ownership, and a lack of professionalism also have been identified as common constraints in Sri Lanka. Global war on terror discourse and its associated policies have been enabling the consecutive Sri Lankan governments in Sri Lanka to comfortably curb media's freedom and punish journalists in the name of war for peace and humanitarian war. Majority of journalists who covered the conflict issues had to face a number of constraints. There have been numerous instances of journalists receiving death threats or being harassed, arrested, attacked, abducted, or killed. Many journalists have been threatened at gunpoint just for the reason that they reported the truth. Since 2005, 34 journalists have been murdered. Not a single murderer has been sent to prison, and up to 25 journalists a year are fleeing the country. Many media institutions have been bombed and burnt. Generally, the journalists have been the target. However, threats, murders, and abductions are not confined only to Tamil journalists. Not a single perpetrator has been brought to justice. Sri Lanka is ranked 162nd out of 179 countries in its 2013 Press Freedom Index. Although there are provisions in the Constitution to protect the freedom of expression in Sri Lanka, there are also legal regulations and statutes which limit the media freedom. There are a number of instances in the legislation that encourage secrecy and weaken the liberal flow of information. The result is that many have stopped reporting and some have fled the country for their own security. They have to report on news according to the instructions of the editors and owners of newspapers, such as avoiding news that antagonizes the paramilitary groups, army, and certain politicians, which causes a negative effect on their professional dignity, practice, and increases security. This has restricted the media to play its role to promote democratisation and consequently created a serious democratic deficit negatively impacting on the promotion and protection of human rights. On the other hand, this situation has created a situation where interest among Tamil students to become journalists and study journalism has drastically declined in Sri Lanka in the post-war period, and consequently the Tamil journalism in Sri Lanka is in a crisis. This has created an acute shortage for talented journalists and affects the standards of journalism. Currently, journalists are following 3 types of censorship. Firstly, when journalists themselves decide whether the news item which they are reporting will threaten them, and where they do not report on such an item if there is a threat to them. Secondly, when censorship is imposed by their institution. And thirdly, when the censorship is imposed by the government. For example, since the end of armed war in May 2009, the Tamil newspapers in Sri Lanka have almost stopped reporting the events and happenings in the Tamil diaspora as a result of self-censorship caused by threats, intimidation, and legal actions and the Prevention of Terrorism Act. As you may be aware, the Sri Lankan government recently banned a number of Tamil diaspora organisations, linking them with terrorism under UN Security Council Resolution 1373 of 2001. Freedom of expression is one of the basic pillars of a democratic society. The professional journalism in a free media society is essential to inform both decision makers and the people about existing realities concerning the conflict issues. Furthermore, the professional journalism can be instrumental in conflict resolution, where the information it disseminates is reliable, protecting and promoting human rights and representing diverse views. It is a kind of media that reduces conflict and fosters human security. Currently, there is a dire need in Sri Lanka to establish a media platform that provides free flow of information exposing human rights violations, giving the citizens the opportunity to make informed choices about their future while providing a watchdog function. This is where the role of internet media becomes important. However, the growth and professionalism of the internet media are not satisfactory. Of course, there are a lot of Tamil diaspora media websites coming out, but they lack the standards of journalism and professionalism. They often report rumour as facts and often fall in the trap of propaganda and create panic, misunderstanding and suspicions among the Tamil people. Most of these websites are operated by a single person without any journalistic experience and skills. I would like to end this speech by appealing to the Tamil diaspora to extend their hands to the Tamil Media Alliance to strengthen and develop the Tamil media in Sri Lanka by means of training, technical support, best practices, etc. Media is a cornerstone of success of the Tamil people in Sri Lanka and their positive socio-economic and political change. Once again, my apologies for not being with you all in person, and I wish you all a successful conference. Thank you.